It is time to talk some Carolina football as official visits are set to begin on campus this weekend. And we do it with one of the best out there, Hale McGranahan of thebigspur.com. You'll need to unmute there first, Hale, and then we can have you be part of our conversation. But we love having you, and good to see you. I know that you just moved, and I hope everything is settled in nicely for you and your family, my friend.
We're getting there slowly but surely. We're on the way to returning to normalcy in our home.
Well, that's hell. When we moved, when my kids were 6 months old, because this has happened to probably how many families across the country. You have kids, you look around, you go, yeah, this ain't gonna work. We're gonna need more space because quickly you all these gadgets are given to you and all these things, and then every room you have turns into a kid's room. So it takes time. It takes time, and I'm sure that you'll be just fine. And your beautiful bride will get it all set up the way she wants it, and everybody will be happy, right?
Yeah, I think that's a safe assumption. We're going to operate under that.
Just stay out of her way. I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, Carolina this weekend, it's official visit time for the Gamecocks. How many, as of now, are slated to be on campus?
So I know there are definitely 7 for sure. I've reported a couple different times that number is probably going to be higher. At least, let me start over. It was higher than that a few weeks ago because it included a handful of names of guys who said they were going to come in and visit. Then that changed as things do. That's not uncommon. Happens every year. These guys are lining up their official visits, sometimes 2, 3, 4 months ahead of time. And things eventually change. And a couple weeks ago, I think I put out a list that had maybe eight on there. Then one of those guys, Micah Smith, the offensive lineman from Florida, he was removed from the list. So now we're sitting at 7, but that 7 will jump back up here probably later this week. We'll be in better position to talk more about that. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now. And as we've seen in previous summers, Shane Beamer's staff, they try to keep the number per weekend capped around like 12. They don't want to go too much higher than that, if at all higher than 12, because they're trying to not overextend themselves. They want to make sure everybody gets ample attention and can receive all the care and attention that they need for being official visitors. So yeah, that's where things are looking to get started here on Friday, May the 30th.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that you mentioned that. We did have a chance to speak with Darren Usher last week. He didn't give the number 12, but he did say that they do try to limit their official visitors at, or the number of official visitors for these weekends because of what you just mentioned, wanting to make sure they give appropriate time and attention to each one of them and make their experience the best, most personable experience that they possibly can. Seemingly it's working for South Carolina because this roster has certainly upgraded itself in the last few years. You mentioned 7 names. Can you rattle off those 7 names for us?
Yeah, let me pull up my list.
Okay, your handy-dandy notebook.
Yeah, that's on my phone. There's Kari Adams, the cornerback from the Baltimore area who visited earlier this spring. He's a high 4-star. Anthony Baxter, the offensive lineman from South Point and Rock Hill, who's been committed for more than a year now. PJ Dean, who is from Clemens, North Carolina. He's an interesting one because he was an offensive line recruit for the longest time. But at some point along the way here recently, he decided he wanted to play defensive tackle. So Carolina's recruiting him as such. KJ Johnson, the cornerback from Birmingham, who's visited twice this spring. I mean, he got the offer, I want to say it was in like February, maybe March, and showed up like a week or 2 later and then came back again before the end of spring practice. So he's certainly got a lot of interest. Travis Johnson, receiver from Oscar Smith High School up in Virginia. he out of all these guys that are visiting this weekend, he's the only one who hasn't been in this year. He came to the Texas A&M game in the fall, so obviously he had a really good experience that night at Williams-Brice. Carter Meadows, the 5-star defensive end from Washington, D.C., who was at the spring game, he'll be back. He was in the entire weekend for the spring game. Obviously, a big-time prospect for Sterling Lucas. Then Javian Shabazz, another offensive. Well, he's an offensive tackle. He's from North Carolina, East Forsyth High School, similar part of the state, I believe, is P.J. Dean. This guy's an offensive tackle, a true offensive tackle. Then the one name that we'll talk a little bit more about later on the Big Spur later this week. But yeah, that's the quick rundown right there.
Yeah, JB Shabazz must be a very smart guy, probably incredible hygiene, very handsome with a name like JB. He's got to be. Let's start with Kari Adams. That was tongue in cheek. I hope somebody picked up.
No, definitely on those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, man, I've had 3 cups of coffee this morning. I got to get the jokes out that my wife doesn't want to hear. Let's start with Kari Adams from Towson, Maryland, the corner. He's a big time kid, right? He's a composite top 100 player in the country. I think 24/7 last time, or 247 last time I saw it, had him like 35 or 36 or something like that. Mm-hmm. What is South Carolina's biggest obstacle there, and where do they stand with him? Where do you think they stand with him?
Yeah, I would think the biggest obstacle for him is probably just who else is recruiting him, being from the Baltimore area, up in that's kind of like Penn State's backyard, so to speak. Yeah. So they're a big time player. Oregon's very involved as well. They obviously recruit at a national level. Notre Dame is definitely a factor too. Michigan. So I would say, just to answer your question, JB, is that just those big time programs who are all national players. That right there is probably the best way to answer. Just listen to those handful of schools.
Yeah, you're talking about a bunch of playoff teams there.
Yeah,
it's hard to beat those guys. There's no doubt. I noticed, as long as this is right, I think he's listed at 6'2", 175. That seems to fit the profile perfectly for what Torian Gray looks for.
Yep, you nailed it. That's the type of guy he wants playing cornerback in his secondary for sure.
Mm-hmm. And if anybody out there wants to go against Torian Gray, I don't care what program you're from, good luck, because he's pretty good at this thing too. As a matter of fact, a lot of those teams would probably like to have him on their staff, but they can't have him because he's the Gamecocks. So he'll be in this weekend. You mentioned P.J. Dean from Clemens, North Carolina, and I apologize. Hey, I was under the impression from the Lou Holtz days that Clemens was actually in the upstate, but I guess there is a Clemens, North Carolina, so we'll stick with that. Yeah, one of the more interesting recruiting cases or story, or however you want to explain it out there. Again, he's a top 100 composite guy, and who knows what he weighs now. I mean, I know he's 6'4", 6'5". I think he was somewhere around 250 or whatever. And then you had mentioned, I think a couple of months ago, Hale, that it was Georgia that said, yeah, here's where we think you belong on this side of the ball. So where do you think South Carolina stands in all this with him right now, considering the Dogs are the ones, I don't want to say they gave him the idea to switch sides, but, that did kind of originate there. Feels like, it's kind of like their game plan for him. Where do you think the Gamecocks stand in this sucker? Yeah,
they're somewhere in the top 3. I mean, Georgia initiated or planted the seed to make the move. His older brother is Jared Wilson, who was a starting center for Georgia the last couple seasons and is now in the NFL. So yeah, Georgia, obviously. Ohio State's another factor in this thing for him, and South Carolina's in the top 3 as well. I tend to think that Georgia is probably going to be tough to beat, maybe just depending on where they're at with who else they're recruiting. I mean, as we all know, they tend to cast a pretty wide net when it comes to recruiting along the defensive line, and they typically get a lot of those guys, and they're usually pretty highly ranked and all that stuff. So I would think probably no higher than second, just given that. But also, obviously, Ohio State's a pretty significant player in the recruiting world, and obviously on the field as well. So Carolina's in the mix for sure. I mean, he visited earlier this spring. I think it was a few days before the spring game at South Carolina was when he came back. He I think before that his previous visit was in December. He was at one of the bowl practices, and it was interesting. I can't remember if I've talked about it on the show or not, but he posted a picture with Lenoris from after practice or whatever, and didn't look much, if at all, bigger than Lenoris did standing next to him. And some of the folks on the Big Spur were like, "This guy's an offensive line recruit," and it's kind of a fair thing to wonder, because he's not like a big wide body, and Lenoris is obviously 245, so like it's not like he's small, but PJ Dean didn't look like the type of guy that would necessarily be one you'd want protecting Lenoris, but he's still, Dean that is, has a good frame, and I think he's probably in like the 255, 260 range, somewhere in there. And yeah, it looks like he's going to be a defensive tackle the next level. I think South Carolina has operated under the belief that they're just going to recruit him as sort of an athlete, like, hey, if we get him in the boat, we'll figure it out when he gets here, that type of deal. But yeah, I think he is kind of intent on playing on the defensive side of the ball at the next level. And he's a good player too. Like, I say all that's about him, his size and how big is he and that type of stuff. I mean, he's really good. Like, obviously that goes without saying when Georgia and Ohio State are after you, as well as South Carolina. Like, they recruit good players too. So yeah, I don't want folks to kind of get caught up in like the body and the frame and all that type of stuff that can kind of get overblown sometimes.
No, 100% agree with that. Yeah, I don't think that all these guys would be willing to take him on the defensive side of the football if they didn't think he can play on the defensive side of the football. I mean, I as a matter of fact, I think it's pretty remarkable that there's a guy like this out there, because generally, I'm not saying that generally when you hear these type of stories, I quite frankly, I haven't really heard a bunch of them myself, but a guy who maybe one school says, hey, maybe you'd be better on this side of the football, and everybody kind of quote unquote falls in line or whatever, but they like him just as much on that side. Like, that's not normal, to be honest, right? Hale, it's actually very, very rare. You do wonder, what type of, initial or early playing time does that help project for him? I mean, I think he would have been a little bit more of a project on the offensive line, which isn't unusual either. Most offensive linemen are projects. It takes them 2 or 3 years to kind of get in there. But this guy flipping to the defensive side of the football, maybe he is a candidate for early playing time, wherever he lands. Who knows?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting just thinking about it that way, and it in some ways it reminds me of a guy who played at Clemson back when I was covering him, and DJ Reader, who's from Greensboro, and some folks I can't remember if South Carolina was recruiting him back then or not, but and obviously a different type of player. I mean, DJ Reader was like 300 plus pounds, so like different that way, but similar in that he was mostly like an offensive line recruit, and I think a lot of schools recruited him as such coming out of Grimsley High School. Then he ended up signing to play defensive tackle at Clemson, and I think he's still in the league playing defensive tackle and has been there for a while. So he was obviously really good. So yeah, kind of similar that way in that. Yeah, it was sort of viewed as an offensive lineman, but hey, you know what? He ended up playing defensive tackle and was really good.
All right. Speaking of the defensive side of the football, Carter Meadows is a big name, and he's a big man too. 6'6", 230 pounds, out of Washington, D.C., and I believe Gonzaga High School, if I'm correct on that. Hale, here's another top 100 composite kid who's going to play on the edge in college football. Sterling Lucas is all over this. Carolina, man, these guys have some good recruiters, man. Sterling Lucas is certainly just beyond excellent at what he does. Where do things stand there? And how soon of a decision do you think this guy, or how soon do you think he might, how quickly do you think he might come to a decision as to where he wants to play college football?
I would guess he's going to get these official visits in. I believe he semi-recently announced a top 4 that includes a lot of the other teams that we've already mentioned: Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan.
That's crazy.
So if he wants to play in the SEC, like obviously he could play at other places besides South Carolina, but South Carolina, I think, is the only one that he's really considering at this point. So yeah, those are the handful of schools that he's considering in addition to Carolina. I believe he's going to do his official visit, all of his official visits, then make a decision after that. Don't know on an exact timeline with him, but I would imagine he's the type of guy who, if he wants to go all the way till December in that early signing period, he could probably pull that off and continue to be recruited, or who knows, maybe he'll commit relatively soon and shut things down, and that'll be that. So don't know of an exact timeline where his head's at with that stuff, but I would think that he's going to take these official visits like a lot of these guys are doing now. I mentioned earlier that some of these trips have been scheduled 3, 4, 5 months ahead of time. So I think there's just a lot of build up and anticipation with these guys wanting to take those trips, and rightfully so. They the good opportunities for these guys, and as high school recruits, I think you kind of talked about this a couple weeks ago. Once in a lifetime to do this as high school recruits. So, so I think that's where he's at.
I'll be honest with you. If I was a big time high school recruit, I'd be visiting Hawaii and Oregon and Miami, and then I'd tell them all no and go to South Carolina. But that would be kind of my game plan. This is the first of he's taking 4 officials, but the Gamecocks are the first stop, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Do you think that has an impact, South Carolina being the first one out of the gate, or is it better to go a little bit later, get one later?
I don't know. I mean, there's no good answer to that. Everybody's different. I know there are plenty of people out there who are of the belief that, hey, you get the last one and you got the best chance. But, we've seen plenty of cases over the years where that proves to not be true. So, and it's just kind of case by case.
Be an interesting project for somebody that has a bunch of time to go back and figure out who committed where and where in the process they actually visited that school. Of course, there's also stuff that I think I've talked to Shane about this before. Sometimes it's nice to set the bar. You set it high, and then everywhere you go after that, see if they can meet it. Real quick on Kari Adams, there are some reports floating around that he might be nearing a decision. Do you have anything on his timeline?
I do not. No.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. If you do you mind passing it along to all the subscribers of thebigspur.com?
Yeah, absolutely. No,
we really appreciate that. All right. Wide receiver has been a hot topic around South Carolina for a few years now. Just a couple of years ago, it felt like they didn't have any, maybe one. And now they feel like they've got a bunch, and there's a bunch of youth there as well. Top 150 prospect is scheduled to be in town this weekend, and Travis Johnson, as you just pointed out, from the beautiful eastern shore of Virginia, Chesapeake, to be exact. Look, again, Hale, as you've already pointed out with the previous guys, some of the usual suspects are involved with this kid, just like the Gamecocks are. But are there any others to keep an eye on? And you mentioned, I think you said that this is his first trip to Columbia, right?
No, he was at the A&M game in the fall.
Oh, okay. All right. So his first trip's this A&M game. Got it. Okay. Do you have any information about that trip? And obviously he's coming back, so obviously it was good enough. But anything that happened on that trip that's that's pertinent to his recruitment here in Columbia?
I mean, I think it was just one of those deals where he came in and I'm pretty sure that was his first trip to Columbia, but came in and obviously saw an incredible environment, really entertaining game that Carolina won. So you automatically check a lot of boxes when that stuff happens, and probably have the attention of anybody. I mean, we've seen that over the years with a lot of guys, kind of starting back in that Tennessee game. And what I guess it was 22 that season when they had a ton of recruits and were able to really get a big boost in recruiting from that night. So certainly helpful that way. We'll see. I kind of all along, JB, with this 2026 receiver recruiting class, as we saw how things fell into place in 2025 with Donovan Murph and Jordan Gidron reclassifying and joining Malik Clark and Jaden Sellers and Lex Cyrus and Brian Rowe. Like that is a lot of players at one position.
Yeah.
Especially when you don't have more than 2 or 3 on the field at a time. Like I've been of the belief for quite some time that it was going to be a challenge to go out and replicate what they did in 26 or what they did in 25 with the 26 class at receiver. So I'm a little leery of South Carolina being able to pull it off again, just because they've got all those big time guys who are getting ready to be freshmen, who are already freshmen, and probably will be playing. Some of whom will be playing a good bit this fall. So that might make things a little more challenging for Mike Furry and those guys, but we'll see. I mean, you mentioned that Johnson's got some of those other like contenders for him, with like Michigan being one of them, Penn State, another, Virginia Tech. He's from Virginia, so Virginia Tech's in the mix there as well. So we'll see with him. I think it's going to be tough for South Carolina to pull off getting a guy like him or a Ryan Mosley, who's a highly recruited guy from Georgia, who's supposed to be in next month as well for an official visit. So yeah, I'm not real sure where I'm going with that right now, but just sort of anxious to see if South Carolina can really make some noise with Travis Johnson this weekend.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll find out. Like you said, there's a bunch of talented young kids who will play this fall for the Gamecocks. All right, Anthony Baxter, the young man from the great state of South Carolina. He has been committed to Lonnie Teasley and Shane Beamer and this staff for quite some time. 6'3", they got him at 335 pounds. I don't know where he is right now, but they'll get him in on his official this weekend. Has anything popped up in his recruitment? I mean, I'm assuming that he's still fielding calls or still being recruited by others out there. It's part of the reason why they want to get these guys on campus and continue to keep them around. But anything of note or anything noteworthy in what's going on with him?
No, not that I'm aware of. I don't really think there's a whole lot going on. He's
perfect.
He's an interior wide body offensive lineman, and generally those offensive linemen a lot of times are a little more low key. They can be a little more low key than some other positions. And I think he's very much like that. He's kind of a quiet guy, doesn't have a lot to say, unless you like really know him well and he's comfortable around you. I think he's just kind of about his team, South Point High School, and I think he's a vocal leader for them. But as far as some of the other peripheral type stuff, I don't think that's really a big thing for him. I think he's pretty well locked in on South Carolina.
Okay. And then the pride of Kernersville, North Carolina, JB Shabazz, is a large human being. He is about between 6'6" and 6'7", a little over 300 pounds, and you can tell why everybody in the world wants this young man. Where does South Carolina stand with him?
I think they're in good position. North Carolina's a factor for him, which isn't the case for a lot of the highly recruited guys in that state. in this 2026 class. He's one of the few. So yeah, the two Carolinas. I think he's scheduled to take officials to Auburn and Ohio State as well. So keeping an eye on those two schools too. But we'll see if it's a Carolina versus Carolina deal for a guy who's pretty close to both schools.
Yeah, South Carolina. Let's talk about their recruiting in the state of North Carolina for a second, Hale. I mean, they've always been able to kind of pick some guys out of there, and then you'll have some downtime where it feels like forever that they don't get somebody who ends up coming in and being impactful in this uniform. But as far as the top prospects in the Tar Heel State go, how's South Carolina doing with them, just collectively as a group?
Yeah, I mean they're in the mix for several. I mean, Samari Matthews, the 4-star cornerback from Huff High School outside of Charlotte. Yeah. He's been a guy who's visited South Carolina, more than 10 times. Like he's been to South Carolina more than anybody else. Clemson was sort of neck and neck with South Carolina for a while, but I think there's some reporting that they've kind of faded, maybe as a result of what some others are putting together from him from a NIL revenue sharing standpoint, and that some of the others, namely being Texas, they offered him, I think, earlier this spring, and he's been out there for an unofficial, and he's supposed to be taking an official later here this summer. So, South Carolina's still in the mix for him. Noah Clark, big defensive tackle from Durham, who's taking an official visit here in a couple weeks, has been in several times to Columbia. Then Aiden and Andrew Harris, the twin brothers from Matthews, who are coming in a couple weeks as well. So right off the top of my head, those are kind of the main guys from North Carolina here in 2026 that South Carolina is definitely in the mix for.
Okay. All right. And we know that they've got at least two more major official weekends after this one, right?
Yeah, two more. They're doing the following weekend after this one coming up. Then I think it's Father's Day weekend. They're not having any officials. Then I guess it's the weekend of June 20th, that Friday. They'll have one more round, and then the dead period starts a week later. So yeah, two more after this one.
Okay. All right. Hale McGranahan with thebigspur.com. Some news in the last day or so on a current commitment, Keenan Britt. He's said, "Now I'm done. This office is closed. I'm going to South Carolina." Anything from that? I mean, was that expected? What was going on there? What was the reasoning or do you even know a reasoning as to why he decided to say publicly, "No, I'm going to South Carolina. Basically, leave me alone"?
Yeah, I think probably the reason being that he was fielding offers, and I think he had visited at least one or two other schools since he committed, Florida being one of them. And I'm guessing that there was a point when South Carolina staff was like, "Hey, man, let's either firm things up or go in another direction." I think they were. I'm assuming. I don't know for sure, but I think It's probably a safe assumption that they were ready to get that public sort of declaration out of him and reaffirm things a little bit, because he's the only linebacker committed now. They had two, Rodney Colton Jr., and the staff parted ways with him because he wasn't going to play ball that way. Like, he was getting other offers and taking visits, and they weren't totally satisfied with how he was going about that stuff, and didn't feel like that it was going to change. So they elected to move on, and sort of during that time, Keenan Britt was doing similar types of things, but not to the extent that Rodney Colton Jr. was. So yeah, I think as much as anything, it was a perception publicly, but also personally between the staff and Keenan Britt. They wanted to get some reassurances from him, and in today's day and age, there's a couple ways to do it, face to face or privately, but also as public as all this stuff is, you got to sometimes make those types of statements publicly, and here we are.
Rodney Colton Jr., there's no chance of him getting back in the class at any point, is there?
I don't. I think that ship sailed.
That's okay.
A long time ago.
Fair enough. One of the best names in football, if you ask me, Javian Currents out of South Point High School in Rock Thrill, South Carolina, or as they call it, Football City, USA, firmly committed to the Gamecocks. He's one of the best prospects in America, not only in his position, but across all of them. Hale, my understanding with not only is he firm and hey, I'm a Gamecock through and through, I'm coming and we're going to do big things here, but he's been a little bit of a help, or at least he's trying to be on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, so sort of along those same lines of talking about Keenan Britt, like Currents has talked about visiting other schools. I mean, he told me a couple weeks ago that he was going to take a visit out to Texas next month, and also to I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, but it was two other schools. So Florida State, Texas and Florida State. And I don't know if those are definitely still happening or not. I mean, I know he posted a graphic saying committed on it about a week ago, the other day. But yeah, he's, as I've said all along, even as he started getting more offers and fielding interest and talking about visiting other places, I've been skeptical that South Carolina was going to lose him. Like I think he's pretty firm, even with all that stuff being said. He has been, to your point, he's been recruiting Samari Matthews, who we talked about a minute ago.
Yeah,
they're buddies. They've worked with the same DB trainer, Chachi Sullivan, who's actually the defensive coordinator at Huff for Samari Matthews. They played 7-on-7 together. So they're buddies. Like, and if Currents does take those official visits that I mentioned to Texas and Florida State, it's the same weekend that Samari Matthews is taking his official visits to those two schools. And they just so happen to be scheduled to take the official visit to South Carolina the weekend of June 20th. So yeah, he's doing his part as a commitment that way. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to see if these official visits transpire for him.
Okay. As far as in-state recruiting goes, Hale, it's a pretty good class, as we all well know. I think the most popular name that continues to come up is Julian Walker. Clearly, Jamil is his dad. Everybody knows by now is on staff at South Carolina. Have you heard anything about his visit schedule this summer?
Yeah, I know he talked about taking an official visit to South Carolina in June, but he's going to do that in the fall for whatever that's worth. Okay. I believe he's got, I'm pulling up his profile right now, so I got the dates right. Yeah, so he's got Michigan June 20th. He's supposed to be at North Carolina this weekend. I don't know if there are going to be any others between those two. Like Missouri's been involved with him. He went out to Como earlier this spring. Southern Cal's got an offer out to him. I mean, he's got several others, but right now I think it's North Carolina and Michigan. They're scheduled. NC State's been involved with them too.
Okay.
But
this is only going to pick up for him, especially once he starts playing in August.
Yeah, I mean, he's really good.
You've been all over this since day one. I could, we just haven't hit the peak of it yet when it comes to the national recruiting stage and this kid. There's no way. I mean, he hadn't played the season yet. I hadn't started it.
Yeah, so I've talked about it a few times, I think, but he was a guy that I saw at a spring game a year or two ago with his dad, and I didn't know that he was Jamil's son, because he's just so tall, and he doesn't look like a high schooler. Like he's just pretty mature physically and all that. And I was like, well, maybe this guy's like a GA in the weight room or something, and he just finished playing at some some school, and maybe I'll know who he is once I see his name. Maybe I'll recognize it. But come to find out, he was a high schooler. I guess he might have been like a sophomore at the time. So it's like, all right, well, does he play football? Yeah, he does play football. All right, well, there's nothing hardly at all on him online. So is he any good at football? Well, I didn't have a chance to go see Dutch Fork until they played in the state championship game against Somerville this past December at South Carolina State, and he had a couple sacks, made some big plays in that game, and so yeah, he looked the part, played the part, and you just come to find out he's just pretty low key guy. Doesn't really post his offers. Still doesn't really post his offers. Took him a while to get his highlights out, and by the time his junior highlights got out, he put them out in January. That's when all the other offers started coming in. It's like, all right, well, yeah, doesn't take a rocket scientist or a football savant to figure out that guy's pretty good. You just look at him and watch him play a little bit, and like, yeah, he's legit. So